Hi everyone, welcome to the second lesson in the series, which is all about creating variables, which are referred to as app states in Flutterfly. So variables, just for those that are uninitiated, maybe don't have a background in programming, what variables are the easiest way to explain them is to think about when you have an algebra equation where you have an x value and a y value. It's the same sort of thing in that you can assign the x value anything you like. Variables very much operate in the same way. Now to create a variable and the app state variables, when we go across here, you've got to go to the little bit of an icon there and click on that, and you can enter the add app state variable. Now, basically, what it is these are variables that are used on your local device. Okay, so if you've got a phone, basically this variable or app state is assigned a name, and then from there, basically that's stored on your local device. Now, the first thing you need to do is you need to give it a name. So I'm going to give it the name counter. You can give it a name anything you like. But what you should be doing whenever you're doing these things is you should be using names that make sense. Okay, names that make sense of what the variable is going to be used for. Because over time, if you build a full app, you're going to end up with 20, 30, 40, 50 of these things that you need to use for different purposes. Okay, so once you have that, basically the next step is that you need to assign a type of variable. So this is where we probably want to just make sure everyone's clear on all the different variables. So there's a heap of different variables. I'm only going to concentrate on the ones that I think are most relevant. So the first one on the list is integer. So that basically means whole numbers. Okay, so we're looking for anything that is 1, 2, 3, 4, or minus 1, minus 2, minus 3. Okay, and they're for numbers. Okay, now the reason why it's important to identify, and Flutterflow forces you to do this, your variables, is that they also put into the programming that, for example, in the case of integers, that you can add to that value. Okay, so if you have a string, for example, and you put the value 1, you won't be able to say, I now want to say 1 plus 1. Okay, so an integer is a whole number. A double is one you would use for decimal places. So numbers, but they are numbers with decimal points, basically. Doesn't mean you can't store integers in there as well, but basically, yeah, you're using things with a decimal place. The next term, again, all of these terms will be really familiar to you if you have programmed in the past and used to a language, but if you're not, some of these terms will be a little bit different. So the next one is a string variable. A string is just basically text, a list of text or names or whatever. The next one, Boolean, that means true or false. And then you've got things like color. So specifically, if you want to tell it, you want to have a color as a variable. So an example of where you might use that is, for example, you might have a button that changes the color of the background that you're choosing. Okay, and then you've got a few other ones. Date and time's another one I can think of, and document reference will be an important one, but it doesn't make a lot of sense until you're actually doing a back end, so we won't worry too much about those. But these first 4 to 5 are the most important. Okay, so for me, because it's a counter, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to choose an integer. Now, there's a couple of other things here for settings that you probably should understand. So firstly is a list. So in Flutterflow and in all programming, basically you can have an app name, a variable name, and it can be a list of numbers, not just a single value. And that's referred to, sometimes you'll hear the term array. Okay, so if, for example, we wanted to choose to have a series of numbers, so for example, you might have a series of measurements for someone's height and body parts or whatever, then you might want to choose a list. The second setting here is a thing called means value is persisted. So what that means is basically that if you set the value for the app state, what will happen is that it will remain on your device saved, which means, so for example, if you're making a game and you had a high score and you wanted that high score to remain and be only replaced when there's another high score, then you'd want that to be a persisted value. For the most part, I generally don't bother with a persisted unless there is a good reason. Okay, so once you've got that, that's when you've got your list of variables, and you can just keep adding them. Okay, and then you can put in a default value, which is optional. Okay, but one of the things to be aware of is, and I've done this a few times, is sometimes you'll accidentally put in and you realize once you're starting to try and program that you've got the wrong data type. We've got the wrong name. Once these names are set, they can't be changed. So it means that you might have to delete the variable and then put it in with the correct whatever it is. Now I'm going to put a default of 0 for the moment. Okay, and then we've got an adds a variable, and I'm going to add a second one, and I'm going to call it name, and I'm going to make that a string just so we've got a few different options to look at. Okay, so once you've created your variable, then what can happen is you can use your variables to do something. Okay, so for example, we might try getting someone's name. Okay, so we need a different widget to be able to do that. So if we want to do that, then I'm gonna put in a widget called text field, I think it is. Okay, it's here somewhere. Text. That's the one. Text field. Okay, and I'm going to add that in. I'm going to add that in here. Okay, so what text field is? This text is basically a label. Text field is allows the user to enter their name. Okay, so we might do a few things with this now. So the first thing is we can go and have a look at formatting the text field. Okay, so if we click on that and we look at our settings, we might do the usual thing of having 10 padding. Okay. And what we can do is put in the initial value. Okay. Now you can have a default value that you enter here. So you could have a name or whatever if you wanted to. Or alternatively, I think there's somewhere down here, there's label the text, so we might label it. And I'm just going to call that user name. Okay, so now we have a little bit of a field on top, okay, with telling us what that is, okay. And then what we might want to do as well, and it's down here somewhere, I've just got to find it, and sometimes you got to look around, is your hint text. Okay, and hint text is a way of telling the user or communicating with the user what you're expecting them to do. Okay, so we might say something like enter your first name. Okay, so once we've done that, we've got our text box set up. I'm not overly worrying too much about, and we might get rid of that as well. We don't need that for the moment. Okay, so we've got that variable, and let's say we want to get the person, they come into the app, and we want to get them to enter their name, and then what we need to do is we want to use that to say welcome to the app. Okay, so if we want to do that, what we can do is, if we have a remember from the previous video, hopefully you've watched it, is that we want to add an action. Okay, and the action we want to add is we want to set a value. Okay, so I'm going to add an action. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a thing called state management. This is one you'll use a lot, and it's update app state. Okay, right, so once we've done that, and by the way, you can update multiple things. So you can see it allows you to choose a field, and the field is the two strings we've created. So we're interested in the name string. Okay, And then what we need to, and you'll see that we can still add. So for example, if I wanted to set the value for the other field, I could do it in the one command. Okay, I won't bother. But okay, so now I need to just set the value. So I set the value, okay, and this time what I'm going to do is I could set the value to a name, like, but the problem is that if someone comes in, their name will be obviously different depending on who's coming in. So we want to make this this behavior dynamic. So as the user enters their name, we want that user to collect the name. Now, what we do is we see these little orange, these sort of orange icons. We can click on that, and it gives you a whole heap of options of things that you can do. So if we go to App State, okay, App State allows you to select one of the app states, but actually what we want is the widget state. So what the widget state is widget state is whatever the widgets are that are on that page. Okay, so on that page, we've only got the one widget which has some values. Okay, so you'll notice that there is actually more than one widget on the page. One is a button, one is a text field. Well, a button you can't really assign things. So what Flutterflow does is it just brings it down to the available choices. So in this case, we've got the text field, okay? And so what we're doing is we're basically, whatever value they enter, we can set their name, okay? So then basically what we can do is we've now got that value assigned to the name string, the name variable. Okay, now I'm going to delete this one which we used from last time because we don't need that. Okay, so basically what happens in this sequence is the user enters the name gets entered into this variable, and then we go to the next page. Okay, so that's what we want. Now what we want to do is I want to welcome the user. Okay, so I'm going to welcome the user, I'm going to create we might center the column too. Let's center the column quickly. Okay. Okay, that'll do. Okay, and I'm going to add a widget to it. Okay, and I'm going to go to the widget tree, and I'm going to add a piece of text. Okay, so this one is like what we had previously, and we're going to have just text. Now the difference with a text box to a text field is that the text field allows the user to enter data, whereas here it's just displaying a value. Okay, so I'm just going to pop that up the top. Okay, and what we might do, because these look a bit ordinary, is we might add some padding quickly, wherever that is. Okay, we'll make it 10. And we'll make the button 10 as well. In the wrong place. Okay, and we'll make that 10 as well, just to make it a little bit neater. Okay, all right, so we've got our page set up. And so what we want to do is we want to send the message, welcome whatever the person's name. So let's say they enter the name Peter. I'm going to say welcome Peter. Okay, so to do that, what we need to do is we need to find the value. So the text here is what we're interested in. So that's the text that's displayed there. Okay, and this time what we want to do is we want to say, well, we can start by just assigning the app state, okay, which is the name. Okay, so what happens now, and for the display purposes, you just see a sort of square bracket with the name, and that just means that when the person enters the data, what will happen is that it will display the name there, but because you don't know what the name is, it just displays a sort of the variable with the name. Now, if we do that, and what I'll do quickly is start up a test mode while we're waiting. I'm still explaining. Okay, so we want to do that, but the problem is that we don't want to just say Peter or whatever the person's name is. We want to say welcome Peter. So what we can do is we need to change that, and there's another option here. Oops. So I'm going to remove the option we've done so far. Okay, which goes back to its default of hello world. Okay, and this time what we want to do is we're going to use a different thing. We're going to use a combine text, because what we want to do is we want to combine a welcome message with a variable value. So welcome, no comma, and I've put a space at the end. Okay, and then I'm going to put in the app state value, which is the name. Okay, so basically what you're doing is sending a welcome message. All right, and you'll see that it kind of gives you a funny sort of appearance, but let's now go and test it. Hopefully it's up and running by now. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to click the instant reload to get it up. Okay, so here we go, and we can click on here, enter your first name. So I'm going to put in the name Peter. Okay, we go to the second page and we get welcome Peter. Okay, so that's how you're using variables to basically make your page dynamic. Okay, now if we have a look at another scenario where we've got our second variable, which is a an integer, we'll have a look at the differences in the variables now. So if I, for example, want to have a button and what I want to do now is I want to have a counter. So each time this button is hit, I want the number to go up. Okay, so the value to go up. So what I need first is I need to place a widget, which will be a text widget, another one of those. So I'm going to click another test widget. Okay, our text widget. Okay, and now what we want to do is that we want to do a similar thing in that we want to assign a value. Okay, so we want to assign the value, and this time we want just to display the counter. Okay, okay, so we can do that. So that's now assigned to this value. So whatever that value is of that counter, and it is what will be displayed. So you might remember that the default value that was set previously was 0. Okay. Now, if we want a button that's going to change the counter, what we need to do is assign an action. Okay. So if we go to our button and we go to our action lists, okay, and previously in the previous video I had assigned a couple of actions to it. I'd assigned a navigate to the home page, and this time we want to assign a new action, and this action will be to reset the state value. Okay, so the app state, we need to go state management, update the value, okay, and we need to select which app state we want to update. So in this case, we're going to do integer, okay, and when you get integer, you actually get 3 options. Previously on the string, we just had set value or clear value, but because this is a number, we can get it to increment the value either up or down. So if I want to increment the value, I can put the value 1. Now also what you'll see is these little orange things that you see all over the place also allow you, if we click on it, allow you to use variables. So for example, if you want to do an app function where the user nominated the incremental value that we're going up by, instead of 1 by 3, for example, or 4 or 5 or whatever, that we could make this number dynamic as well. So this orange thing tells you basically there's all these options to make whatever dynamic. But in short, basically what we have is we have that each time we click that button, the value will go up by 1. Okay, so I'm going to delete this action now. And I'm going to delete this first action, the navigation, because when we click that button, we won't be able to see the variable change, because it will jump to a different page. Okay, so now all that button does is increase the value of the counter. So if we go into test mode again, and then we'll do an instant reload again. And by the way, one of the things here too is that one of the advantages of having a premium account is the length of time that these sessions run for is longer. It's half an hour. I think for when you don't have an account, it's like 12 minutes or something. Okay, so we enter we've got our app. We enter our name, Peter, and we go welcome Peter, and we have our button here for counter, and you can see that now we're able to click and add a value. Okay, so basically that's how app states work. It's pretty simple, but they're a really important concept because they allow you to be able to get your app to really do things. So what I'd recommend that you guys do is have a go at this exercise, which is create yourself a button that changes the color of the button itself and the color here, and see if you can work out how you might have to set up a variable and how you might have to apply it to some of the properties of the button and the background color here, the header, to produce a button that will change the color on command. Alrighty guys, good luck, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers guys, bye.